Okay, here we are. We're done with the actual quilting, and now it's time to square this quilt. This part makes me so nervous. I'm literally looking at every ruler I have. I have a stripology ruler. I have like my 6.5 by 6.5 square ruler. I've got like my true cut ruler, and I'm just trying to think what's the best way to get this actual quilt top squared. And I'm incredibly nervous about making this cut. And a fair amount of this is just you watching me contemplate and fret over where to put the ruler, where to cut, lining up the sides of the stripology ruler. I'll go ahead and say maybe some people have figured out how to. I don't think for larger pieces, like I just know the stripology ruler is not going to be the thing that I need to use. And after I was done with this project, I went back and watched more videos on squaring up quilts. And I did order a longer, wider ruler so that I can attack those corners first and then get the sides. And I'll try to link some of those videos down below that helped me realize what I was doing wrong. But again, that's why we practice. And again, this is like a smaller piece that I was working on, where I'm still working on a lot of those basic skills and techniques. And I'm pretty much just using the internet to help me learn how to quilt and how to sew. And so this is absolutely trial and error. So if you're at home and you're making these cuts and you're feeling like you're slow or you don't know what you're doing, you are not alone. There are many of us out here trying to figure out how to make those first cuts. So continue watching. I did decide that the first thing I should do is just cut off a lot of this excess batting. There was just no point in having it there. And I was hoping that that would help me focus a little bit more on the actual quilt top and kind of remove all of that extra fabric out of my way so I would feel less overwhelmed by the project at hand. So at this point, I get the bright idea to pull out our laser leveler because I saw someone do this on some other videos on YouTube, and I figured, oh, that would be great. And Honestly, I don't think this piece was big enough for me to try to do this. And also, I don't know what I'm doing well enough to be trying to use this, but I did attempt. You'll see me sit here and cut off some of the batting and try to get it in the corner. At one point, I turned down some of the lights. I mean, I am just all over the place at this point with trying to figure out the best way to square this top. And inevitably, I made this probably harder than what it had to be. I'm ultimately not going to use this laser to help me square this. And then I realized too that by putting some of the tip on this little piece of mine, that it made it not level. As you see the little bubble there to tell you if it's level or not. And then I tried to like raise it up with the back of a ruler. I mean, truly doing everything but getting this piece cut because I was just so nervous. I decided to share this screenshot of something I saw earlier about cutting into fabric only because I needed that level of understanding about what it meant to really square your top and why you can have so much anxiety about cutting into this fabric because you work so hard on piecing it together and quilting it. And really some of these cuts that we're making, granted, it's not the end of the world, but I do find these moments to be times where I am somewhat seeking perfection without, and I have to remind myself also that like I don't have years of experience under my belt of sewing and quilting, and I'm literally going to make mistakes. And I have to remind myself that we learn more from the mistakes that we made than from perfection. And we're just going to have to take that knowledge and move forward and take that knowledge on to the next project when we get ready to work on that. And at this point, I'm so fixated on cutting into this material and getting this thing squared that I completely forget in trying to use the laser light. I forgot to put my cutting board underneath my quilt, and I literally cut into the quilt and into the new table that I have, and almost cut my finger because I didn't have the safety on my rotary blade. And so I try to sneak my mat under there without disrupting the edge of the ruler. And I try to take two with the squaring of the quilt. And it's about this point when I realize I think I'm supposed to iron my quilt top before I square it. So I take everything out, put the scissors down, I get my little iron out, and decide to do my best to iron this. Now, in a previous video, we kind of already talked about the buckling that my fabric was doing. I received a wonderful comment from someone who was watching the video, and I should have started in the center of the quilt and kind of worked my way out. That would have helped with the buckling. I also think I didn't know this, but I think batting has a side, and I do think that I might have had my batting on the wrong side. I don't know if that matters or not. I'm still kind of going on a bit of research about that, but at any rate, I obviously was so fixated on squaring the quilt that I forgot to do some basic things like, okay, let's iron our top. Now that we're done ironing, let's go ahead and keep the cutting mat under the project while we're using our rotary cutters. So it's the simplest things that mesh up, and you can see that buckling. I even wonder with the buckling if ironing was a good idea, but you'll see that it does straighten out some of those edge pieces quite nicely, and some of those pieces on the corners here that probably needed a little bit of heat to help stretch out. I'm still trying to figure out if you should just be pressing the top or if it's okay to actually move the iron across the top like in those smooth motions. And I'll try to find some. I've been watching a lot of videos on ironing and pressing and seams. Some of that feels a little overwhelming still. So I decide I'm going to flip this project over and iron the back. I have no idea if you should be ironing the back of your quilts or not, but it felt right, and it bought me some time before I needed to think about cutting and squaring this project again. So I did it. I had some time to burn. Okay, so I kind of sped things up here for us. Here we go. I'm just going to commit. Of course, I'm still learning how to use these scissors, so I just knew it wasn't going to be a perfect cut. And I don't think you can tell from the video, but I'm actually starting to just move my body around the project. So I'm moving the project, and then as I began to get closer and closer to these edges, as I'm trying to square this project up, I start physically moving myself around the quilt. And I'm trying to use my cutting mat to also help me figure out if I've got a straight edge. I feel like some quilters use their cutting mat and some don't. And everybody's using a cutting mat, but like to help you actually square the the project. It feels like some do, some don't. So then I remember watching a video where I saw a quilter use her square ruler alongside her long straight ruler, like the more rectangle ruler, to square quilt. And so that is what I started to do. I basically ditched the stripology ruler and just started trying to eye this particular project, just looking at it and seeing if it looked squared to me based on all the cutting, and then go attack the parts of this project that did not appear to have straight edges still. And there I am again, poorly cutting. I mean, like, I'm putting my body weight on top of the ruler and everything. So I just think this is one of those things that takes time. So another check that I'm trying to do to see if my lines are nice and even. I was using my cutting mat, but then I'm also using my ruler to see if I'm maintaining a 1/4 inch. I'm just using the 1/4 inch line to see if it, as I scoot that square down the quilt, if any of the quilt is uneven with that line. And then I don't even know if that's like a really good way to do this, but I'm committed at this point. I'm deep into making these cuts and trying to get this thing squared. So here we are. Okay, and I decide to call this square at this point. Okay, so I bought binding for this particular project, just store-bought bias binding, and this is the way in which I've been putting on my binding and closing my quilts. So here I am just ironing this, and then I'm getting my pins out because it's time to pin this binding, and I'm going to start in the middle of the long side and just pinning my binding down. And I made sure I had a good iron, and I am just going to take my time and go around the perimeter of this project. Okay, so I pulled out my blue sewing machine, and I'm just changing out presser feet here to put my 1/4 inch seam foot on. And here we go. I know that yellow might seem like an odd color to use, but I didn't have a ton of different thread colors to choose from. And since we're still learning, and this little mini quilt is going to be for my one of my kids' lovies, I just decide to use the yellow because I'm invested in the technique of what I'm doing more than matching the colors. And I'm actually proud to say that you can't even tell that I used a yellow thread for this particular project. So I was doing something right. Here I am coming to these corners. And since I made this project the other day, since I've done this binding, I have gone back and watched a lot more videos on binding. And two things that I'm going to do is I'm going to do these corners differently because I think there are better ways to get a corner mitered than what I am doing. And so I do recognize that. But also, I'm going to close my binding differently. The first project that I did, I feel like my binding closure was very flat. But when I was done closing the binding on this project, the closure seemed to fray a little bit more. And that's unfortunate. But hey, you live and you learn. Okay, so at this point, I feel compelled to iron again. There is a lot of ironing and sewing and quilting. feel like almost every after the end of every step, the next thing to do is to iron. So if you don't have an iron or you don't have a good one, you should probably invest in something. All right, so now I'm trying to actually check these corners out. I'm like, oh, that one's not so bad. And then it kind of just goes downhill from here in terms of a nice looking corner. And this, I realize I'm going to actually have to get put back under the sewing machine because that just straight up didn't attach, or I think I stopped a little too early and I didn't go back far enough to start. So I have to repair that, get everything folded over, use my pins, and I decide that I'm going to close this project by hand. I go with a number 8 white pearl cotton, and I kind of flipped between the shorter quilting needle and a longer quilting needle. So what I have been practicing is getting multiple bits of fabric onto the longer needle so that I can have more stitches basically in place, when I pull it. So that's something that I wanted to practice doing. So I did, because that's what we're here to do, is to learn. And I was just showing the Shishiko needles that I use for quilting and binding. Okay, so here I am, kind of semi struggling to thread this needle. Everything just seemed like a struggle on this day. But eventually I do get this needle threaded, and I start to, you can already see where I've started to sew on this binding, and I think I was switching out needles. I was using the smaller needle, and then I was like, let me try the longer needle because I want to start working with that longer needle, as I felt like I could get this process done faster. So I'm putting in my quilter's knot, and I am getting to work on finishing this project up.
Okay, well, here the project is. It's completed. This is pre-wash. I'm going to put this in the washing machine with a color catcher because I did not pre-wash any of my fabrics, and there's some white in this project. And I felt compelled to play with it a little bit and roll it up. I learned a lot of lessons. I'm very proud of myself that I started this project, stuck with it, and finished. Here is the project out of the dryer. You see that quilt crinkle. I am so happy I did this, and I cannot wait to start the next project and take all the lessons I learned from this project and apply it to that one.